Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, May 21st. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Some might view art or poetry as a side note to daily life, but not Lee Herrick.
I take poetry very seriously, but also very joyfully.
Lee was recently reappointed by Governor Gavin Newsom as the state's Poet Laureate. We'll learn about what motivates him in just a moment, but first, these news headlines. About a quarter of inmates without legal status held in the Fresno County jail last year were transferred to immigration authorities. That's based on a report presented by the Fresno County Sheriff's Office on Tuesday to the Board of Supervisors. The data was shared as part of a state law requiring transparency from local law enforcement in its interactions with immigration and customs enforcement. The sheriff's office said among the individuals transferred to ICE custody were those accused of drug trafficking, child endangerment, and DUIs that resulted in death or great bodily harm. Community health workers and so-called doulas could soon be paid to screen children for trauma. A bill introduced this week would reimburse Medi-Cal providers if they screen children for exposure to neglect, abuse, or mental health illness. The bill's authored by Valley Assemblyman Dr. Joaquin Arambula. He said this would help address adverse childhood experiences in the San Joaquin Valley. A Mexican Navy ship taking a voyage in New York City last weekend crashed into the Brooklyn Bridge. While the incident happened thousands of miles away, some in the Central Valley are recalling memories of seeing the same ship before. KVPR's Rangel has this report.
The shipwreck left 2 Mexican sailors dead and several others injured. According to early investigations, the ship appears to have accelerated minutes before hitting the Brooklyn Bridge. The destruction was too much to see for Arturo Rodriguez of Tulare County.
This was Mexico's diplomacy plan to go around the world and share the mission and vision of peace and diplomacy.
A large Mexican flag was hoisted at the front of the ship. It was sailing to other places, including Cuba, Scotland, and Spain.
I believe that Mexico will not take those lives in vain and use that as a chapter of resiliency.
Rodriguez is also the founder of the Valley nonprofit, the Empowerment Alliance. He said he plans to put up a local exhibit to honor the ship and the sailors. For KVPR News, I'm Rachel Livenall.
A turtle species that is native to Yosemite National Park is making a small comeback. UC Davis researchers say pond turtles have made a resurgence because of the absence of invasive bullfrogs. They say where bullfrogs lived, baby pond turtles were often eaten. The researchers say that decreasing the number of bullfrogs can help conserve the turtles. Pond turtles are some of the only freshwater turtles left in the state. Officials at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks are gearing up for the start of the summer tourist season. If you plan to be there for Memorial Day weekend, you should expect long lines and wait times. Park staff also advise travelers to purchase day passes and reserve campground sites in advance. Last year, a record-breaking 2 million people visited the park.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Body 20 in Fresno's Fig Garden Village, offering full-body electromuscle stimulation training sessions. It's a high-tech, time-efficient way to help preserve and rebuild lean muscle. Each 20-minute one-on-one session is guided by a certified coach using FDA-cleared technology. Body 20 accepts health savings account cards. More information available by searching the Fig Garden location at body20.com.
And now to our main story. Lee Herrick has many titles. He's an author, poet, and longtime English professor at Fresno City College. He founded Lit Hop, that's an annual festival in Fresno that celebrates local writers. But perhaps one of his most prestigious titles is California's Poet Laureate. Governor Gavin Newsom appointed him to the post in 2023. It's taken him around the state to festivals, book readings, schools, and community centers. Herrick has galvanized people from all over the Golden State to submit poems about what California means to them. And just this spring, Newsom extended Herrick's appointment for another 2 years, perhaps underscoring his impact. Herrick recently visited the KVPR studios and spoke with our reporter, Samantha Rangel.
I understand that your job is to help make poetry more easily accessible to Californians. How do you go about doing that?
You know, what I've found with accessibility is that a lot of communities already have poetry that is emerging. So, for example, it might be at a public library, it might be through a local arts council or at a school. So, in some cases, I go and speak at those locations, but a lot of times really when people are able to just be in a common space with each other, hear poetry, read poetry, it starts to organically happen by itself. So the access sort of emerges on its own. But I'll also add that a lot of times I'm visiting quite remote places. So it always feels good when there's poetry in any space, but especially places that might not otherwise have it.
Governor Gavin Newsom appointed you as State Poet Laureate back in 2022, and then just last month, he extended that appointment for another 2 years. What does being the state's Poet Laureate mean to you?
It's a good question. You know, I take poetry very seriously, but also very joyfully. But what I mean is that poetry or the arts, to me, aren't some superfluous, privileged thing. To me, it's as fundamental as anything. I think we need it in our lives. And so to be appointed as a statewide poet laureate sort of marries that love of the arts and poetry with a commitment to like the civic fabric of a community. So it means advocating for poetry wherever I can. So it's a great honor, and to be reappointed was unexpected, but I'm happy to keep serving.
Is there any particular reading or moment that has stuck with you that you could share with us from all the different pieces you've encountered?
You know, I've done some readings with Korean adoptees that have been pretty powerful. Not so much my reading being powerful, but when I'm hearing others react and talking with folks after the reading, where people will come up and just tell me what the reading meant to them or what poetry means to them. And I find the ones that seem to have the most impact on me are when it's some kind of personal connection. They might tell me about someone that they've lost, or here's one that comes to mind. I was in Nipomo on the Central Coast recently, and I was doing a workshop where I was asking people to write about music or a sound that they missed. And there was a retired gentleman there who said he hadn't written a lot of poetry, but he wrote a poem during this workshop about his son, who he is estranged from, he hasn't seen in probably 20 years. And his son, though, is a drummer. And he wrote about his son through music and hoping that his son was okay. So that's one of the things that's been pretty joyful about this, is when people write or tell me what poetry has meant in their lives.
And then you're talking about this workshop that you were at. Do you do lots of workshops around California, or how do those come about?
Yeah, I do. I mean, usually people will just write to me, or I have a wonderful person who assists me with events through the California Arts Council, and they write and they'll ask me to would I consider visiting their university or library, whatever it is. Usually it's a reading. It might include a Q&A, and sometimes it's a workshop.
Okay, I asked about what poem that stuck out to you. Now, on another note, what is a poem that you think every person living in California should read?
There are a few that come to mind. Our U.S. Poet Laureate who just finished, Ada Limon, has some wonderful poems. I think her poem, How to Triumph Like a Girl, is very joyful and gender and triumphant. Former U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo has a poem that might speak to this current moment a little bit more specifically, but it's a great poem called Perhaps the World Ends Here. And then to keep it California and to keep it even closer to Fresno, the great Juan Felipe Herrera, one of my favorite poems is his poem called Let Us Gather in a Flourishing Way. And I return to that poem time and time again. I mean, these are poems that can center us. They can slow us down. They can remind us of what is core and also let us imagine what is possible through this beautiful language. So, gosh, I'd love it if every person could read one of those.
That's all I have. Is there anything else that you'd like to add for our listeners?
I would just add that I hope people can remember the poetry in their lives, the poetry inside of them. And by that, I mean the possibility, the imagination, trusting one's sense of the good things in their lives and the possibilities for other people. And I think poetry is part of that.
That was KVPR reporter Samantha Rangel speaking with California's Poet Laureate Lee Herrick. In the conversation, Lee mentioned former U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo. Just a few months ago, we had the chance to speak with her. You can hear that interview on our February 18th episode. And that's today's show. Do you enjoy listening to Central Valley Daily? Support the show by leaving a 5-star rating in your podcast app. We really appreciate your support. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.